Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. All right, we talked a lot about supply in the first roundtable. Now looking at demand. Chip, how concerned are you about these low river levels on the Mississippi River, especially for those elevators and things that really ride on the river as we head into harvest?
Yeah, river levels continue to drop along the Mississippi River. It is concerning. Dan mentioned earlier there may be some rains in the forecast here. Hopefully, they can keep that river open. As long as they can continue barge traffic, certainly they'll load them, less full than they normally would, but that will help keep grain flowing. If there's a total shutdown, it's probably not at the right time here as we get into the gut of harvest. And, it's definitely a concern. It could be a temporary basis issue, but hopefully there's just enough rain to keep the river open from St. Louis south.
Well, now that we're into the new marketing year, we saw some more big buys from China, but it's not just the U.S. that China's buying from. So, Dan, as you look at how historic some of these purchases are, how big are they, and where is China going to for this crop right now?
Well, China's imported a record amount of world soybeans, as USDA reported, at about 101 million metric tons this year. We think that number will be 105 next year. We have a industry that always underestimates Chinese protein demand, so we're expecting that China will be a big buyer going forward. But what really surprises me is the amount of corn China has bought down in the Brazilian market. By looking at Brazilian loadings and vessels that are nominated to go to China, we can already add up around 9 million metric tons on their way to 15 or 16 million metric tons of corn from Brazil. This is massive. And so the world demand picture is relatively robust. It's just that they're not buying it from the United States. And so that gives me encouragement that world demand is very strong for grain. It just needs to shift northward to the United States.
Chip, do you feel like the tide is turning a bit? Do you think that because of the strong world demand that the U.S. could start to be a major demand player?
Yeah, I do. I've never been in the camp of this bearish mentality on bean demand. We just have not seen evidence of that so far. China's been a buyer of U.S. beans along with unknown. We've been selling it even at higher levels a few weeks ago. So I've never been on the bearish bandwagon as far as bean demand goes. I think that world wheat trade is starting to pick up a little bit. I think that we're a little more evenly priced against the world on wheat. And according to some of our forward bookings, it should be that the case that U.S. corn starts picking up in competitiveness all through harvest as well. And you've seen that, maybe a slight indication of that the last couple of weeks with some of these sales we've seen.
Dan, we were in Texas earlier this week and we knew it was dry, but until you fly in and you see how brown it is, and there was just no pasture, no grass for these cattle right now. How long do you think until we start rebuilding this herd, seeing that the drought is such a significant issue still?
I'm doubtful that the herd, we're seeing a little bit around the edges. Cow slaughter is down about 8% this year relative to last year, but we're not retaining heifers yet, which is a big component we need to do in terms of the cattle herd. So with that in mind, I think that cattle cycle is getting stretched. The lack of feed is definitely a problem down in the southern plains. And as I think forward, capital costs, just looking at buying a feeder at $250, is something that's really going to weigh on the banker. So as I think about that expansion, it's going to be a long time in the future, which tells me that the cattle market's going to stay very strong for a long period of time, at least another couple of years.
Yeah, the supply side is very bullish. The demand side, Chip, when you look at energy prices and how they continue to climb and the pinch that it is putting on Americans, are you concerned about that demand piece moving forward?
I am concerned. And you look at the export sales on beef for the last few weeks, they've really kind of hit a bump in the road. You really have to question the consumer going forward. I don't disagree with what Dan's saying, as far as it takes a while to turn the tide and start retaining heifers and building the herd. But the problem is if we start to do that at the same time, we really curtail demand because of record high prices, it's really a bad situation. So I don't think that's something we have to worry about tomorrow or next week, but it is something certainly that is in the back of my mind as a concern going forward over the next few months here.
Dan, real quick, what's your outlook for dairy?
The dairy markets have had a big rally. Of course, cheddar prices, which were kind of in the ditch earlier this summer, have now made new highs. And so the volatility of these commodity markets keeps coming forward. Thankfully, we're seeing dairy slaughter moving up in the cull cow area. And so I'm looking at a brighter 2024 than what I was imagining just a few months ago. And I think this is looking at class 3 prices, maybe making it up to $22 or $23 as we turn the calendar to 2024.
Always nice to end on some optimism. Dan, thank you. Chip, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Stay with us. We'll have much more on U.S. Farm Report when we come back.